Okay, here we go. All right. You were saying before, if you don't mind me paraphrasing.
Yeah. Thank you.
That,
I'm sorry, would you like something for me? Not right now.
that you have not ever had previously a role written as precisely and specifically, if you will, as you have before, and I know that Noah and Jennifer Jason Leigh co-wrote it pretty much, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that it worked is Noah said that he wrote a draft and then he gave it to Jen. I heard him say in one of the interviews he gave it a draft to Jennifer pretty early on, and then she had so much input that they ended up collaborating on the story and based on that. Yeah. So
I didn't mean to. I was thinking about what I said about that wonderful Michael O'Donoghue quote, which I think is so great. For the sake of the camera, I'll just say that Michael O'Donoghue's quote is that the lowest, making people laugh, simply making people laugh, is the lowest form of humor. And that implied that I thought that this was after quote-unquote humor in some way, which I would modify that. It did make me chuckle throughout the whole thing, but recognition chuckle. You know, people should not get the idea that this is a laugher.
Right.
But it is kind of.
No, I agree.
If you're in the right
I think
mindset.
it's very important that there's an expectation going in there. But that being said, I think Noah has a really great sense of humor, and I think he really there are things that we've talked about that we appreciated in the script that we thought were funny, that when you see with an audience don't get laughs, and then other things that I've only seen with an audience once in Berlin, and where there were laughs where I had no idea there would be laughs, in terms of just like awkward moments and things like that. So it's interesting because I think that's with any movie that you always think that you have in your head the places you think it's going to be funny, and it never quite works out the way you think. But I think he's a guy who is not worrying about making a comedy, but yet has a sense of humor within what he does always. Just sometimes I think in this movie in particular, this character for him, I think there are things that he finds funny about him in his own uncomfortable sort of way. Yes.
I mentioned to you earlier that I felt the part of the recognition for me in the character of Greenberg, who is a guy who insists on the world tuning into his various quirks and neuroses, and he has to process and react to life by those set of neuroses. Reminds me a little bit of my brother, a younger brother. And you said something about it reminding you a little bit of the aspects of yourself. Can you elaborate in some way about the? Yeah,
I mean, I felt like there are people in my life who remind me of Greenberg's, his situation. I mean, what I think is interesting, like he's a guy that has. There are aspects of myself in him, but there are also aspects of people I know, people who I think in terms of their circumstances in life have not been as fortunate as I have to have a career, but are very talented and have not had the breaks necessarily. And Greenberg's a lot of his issues are self-imposed, and there are his own sort of the barriers that he has in terms of his. He's talking about his neuroses, whatever it is. And he's trying the best he can, but I guess I sort of empathize on a level of just sort of a guy trying to do the best he can. He's really trying to get through, and it's easy to look at somebody like that and go, well, what a jerk, or that guy's just a I mean, you see some people sort of reduce it down to that kind of a guy, but I felt like there a real empathy for what he was going through. I think the more that I read it, the more I got to talk to Noah about it, and I think there are a lot of people out there in the world who are just trying to get through the day. I think we're all trying to get through the day on a basic level, and he just has not. He's made mistakes. He has, there are turning points in his life that probably affected him for years and years to put him where he is now. But because he hasn't had any successes since then, he hasn't had any real relationships or love in his life, or been able, and probably out of his own doing. It's probably a lot of it. He's a very hard guy to get along with, but he just hasn't had in the last 15 or 20 years anything that's softened the blow of all those mistakes that he made when he was younger. And so it's probably hard for him to even accept that he's responsible in any way for that. You can't look back at that point in time where he didn't take a record deal and say, "Oh, that was the turning point," because then he'd have to acknowledge that his life is not where he wants it to be. And I think anybody going through life, you have to justify and rationalize where you're at. Otherwise, you can't. Otherwise, it's really depressing. And I think he's just trying the best he can. And when the movie picks him up, it's sort of like, I think he's suppressed so much of that stuff for so long that it's sort of almost physicalized itself, and like whatever put him in the hospital and the psychosomatic thing or whatever. And I think you could go as far as saying you might have a chemical thing or whatever. But I never even really thought that until I saw the movie, and I was like, oh, this guy's definitely got some issues. Yeah. But So I think the movie sort of picks up at a point in his life where he's having to face that reality.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about why are they off balance? Why do they tend to make mistakes in their optimum starting out time in their 20s? The conventional answer, what I usually rely on, is that they got pushed around, dented, damaged on some level by their upbringing, and they're just not thinking as clearly as they could, or there's something missing because of that. And I was just thinking, you got out of the gate really early, focus and everything. What is the one or two things that your parents did to support you and set you straight and open you up, and just you were in a good place really early in life?
I don't know if I was in a good place. I think I was in a sort of an unaware place that you're in your 20s, where you don't. I think if you have some focus in your life, you know what you want to do. That's the first thing. That's sort of like you're lucky enough to have that. I think it's a plus and a minus. Like the upside of that is you can. The upside is that you can that you focus on what you want to do. The downside, I think, is that you don't open yourself up to any. For me, so I didn't open myself up to any other experiences in life when I was younger, because I was so focused on what I wanted to be doing. Okay. So I didn't go off and backpack in Europe for a year, or and I regret that, or even stay in college, and I feel like, because that's a time you have in your life that you can't ever get back. But so I don't know. I mean, I saw my parents. My parents were they had a real strong work ethic. They always were having to work hard, and they were committed to what they were doing. And I think I picked that up from them. They were very supportive. I think they understood, being actors, what the process was. I think they were a little protective in that way, especially my dad not wanting. I think he saw how tough the business was, and probably wanted me not to have to go through all that. But that's. But they were supportive. I think a lot of people who want to be actors, their parents don't understand that it can be a tougher road, because they don't get that there's a lot of failure, there's a lot of rejection, there's a lot of years of not being able to even sort of say what you're doing, because there's no actual something you can show for it.
I only said that you hit the ground running in a good place early was because of the brilliance of the Ben Stiller Show, which I thought was one of my favorite all-time DVD collections. And I still have it, and I always will have it, and I would like to see it revived again. Even as if you were a producer.
I mean, I think that was so much a sort of a product of, first of all, the group of people, with Judd and Janine and Bob Odenkirk and Andy Dick and all these people at that time that were just.
You can't go home and get that back again, right? They'll never be in the same place. You're not in the same place. It's all.
I think it's hard to do that, but I think it's also it's about just about, there is that thing about youth where you're just sort of you don't know any better than to just kind of do what you feel you want to be doing, and as you get older, you do realize how much tougher it is, and how you can't really. If you thought about all the obstacles and the barriers that could get in the way, and how hard it is to get